Okay, so today I'm doing a Gearbox racket. This is a 165Q, but every Gearbox frame that I've ever strung has been exactly the same, I think. So this same exact pattern and instructions should apply for all Gearbox rackets. Now this is a one piece. All Gearboxes suggest one piece stringing, using about 39 to 40 feet of string. And what I've done here is I've already strung the two mains, and down the left side of the frame is going to be my short side. And so I've strung 10 feet 8 inches of string down from one head left through one throat left, and then down through the right side of the frame I've strung the rest of the racket from one head right to one throat right. And I'm going to put a starting clamp down at one throat right on the outside of the frame, and I'm going to start by pulling tension on the left throat, the left throat, and I always do this with the starting clamp on the outside, and then I clamp the left, or the right main rather, and this is because this way you're never running an untensioned piece of string through a clamp within the inside of the frame. So this piece of string through here already had tension on it, which is what helps with accuracy. I think it's probably fairly negligible, but now as I release pressure on my left main, my right main is tensioned, held by the starting clamp. So I'm going to pull the exact same main again, and going to clamp at one throat left. Okay, and I'm going to string up through two throat left, and from two throat left up to three head left. So you're skipping the second grommet in the head from 1 to 3. And I'm going to pull tension here as well. I'll go ahead and clamp both of my two mains. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and revisit the starting clamp on the right side of the frame, and I'm going to pull tension here, and as I do that I'm going to remove the starting clamp. And I remove it as I'm pulling because this angle right here with the string against the racket's really steep, and I don't want the string to have a sharp angle against the frame. But now I can move my clamp it one throat right. And what I'm going to do here is string a few more mains on the right side of the frame because what you want to do is not get too many strings ahead on one side of the frame. This way we are putting an equal amount of tension, or roughly an equal amount of tension on both sides of the frame at once, just to not stress the frame as much. So from one throat right, I'm going to go up to three head right. It's the same pattern on both sides. And pull tension up top. And Gearbox rackets have a fairly simple string pattern in terms of remembering it, but they are frustrating to string for a number of other reasons. And one of those reasons you're about to see, which is because the first and second grommets in the throat are a shared hole. So as I string from two head right, I string back down to one throat right, and I go through the same hole again. And the reason this is a pain is because you have to make sure the strings don't twist either inside the frame or cross on the outside of the frame on those shared grommets. Now it doesn't really hurt anything probably, but it at least looks bad. And I suppose at the highest level, players maybe might notice the difference in performance. But in order to do this, you have to be careful when you insert the string in these shared grommets to be paying attention of whether the point of the string comes out above or below the string that you've already strung, I guess, so to speak. Because that way it won't cross, because Gearbox grommets do not have sort of like double holes in the grommets, similar to like an echelon racket, which does a really good job of giving 2 little divots per hole, so the string can be easily guided. Now here I just kind of hold with my fingers to make sure everything stays in place, and I can see nothing is crossed on the inside or outside of the frame, and I can double pull the 2nd and 4th string main at the same time. And now that I'm 2 strings ahead on the right side on my mains, I'm gonna come back to my short side and do the same thing. I'm going from 3 head left to 2 head left to 1 throat left to 2 throat left again, the same 2 grommets. And I'm going to try and again not cross on my first attempt here. So let me just see how this is working out. Now, I see that the way that I fed this string out looks like it's probably going to be crossed inside the frame. I don't think you can see that. So what I'm going to do is, before I keep going on this and pull tension, I'm going to pull this back out. And what I do is I change the angle of which I put the string through the inside of the frame. So what I've done from here is I've gone from 2 head left and I've inserted the string from the top angle. What I'm going to do instead is string it through from the bottom angle, which will give it a better path through the frame without twisting over the existing main, hopefully. And I see that this is going to sit below on the outside of the frame, the one that we've already strung. So as I string from 2 throat left up to 4 head left, I can see that the string is not crossed over on the outside of the frame, and it appears that if I hold this properly, it won't cross on the inside of the frame either. And that looks good. No crossing here, no crossing here. And that's important to me because I think it looks like you don't know what you're doing if you have strings that cross. So that's the challenging part number 1 that takes a little getting used to on a gearbox racket. The second part of a gearbox racket that's tricky is the crosses. It's a 1-piece stringing, but the crosses are strung from the bottom up. And I'll tell you why that's tricky in just a second. As I thread through 5 head left down to 3 throat left, and then from 4 throat left up to 6 head left. So we're not skipping a hole this time. We're going from 5 to 6 on the head, and I can double pull here. The reason and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, by the way, next, because now I'm 2 strings ahead on the left-hand side. The reason stringing crosses from the bottom up is difficult is because the last crosses that you string are always the hardest one due to the bed tension being so high by that point. And usually stringing these crosses at the top of the racket are the easiest because you have the most space. But when you've already strung the bottom crosses, all of these become a lot tighter, and there really aren't very many easy crosses that way. So the way gearboxes work from the bottom up means they're just less convenient to string, frankly. I really wish their pattern, and I could probably figure one out, I just haven't, but I wish the pattern strung crosses from the top down instead of the bottom up. And then the one other thing with the gearbox, so it's the twisting strings you have to watch out for, it's the crosses from the bottom up, and then it's the vibration dampener that you string on its own separate piece of string that make them kind of a pain. It takes a little extra practice and a little extra time to do gearbox. The good news is it's pretty easy to remember the pattern. The bad news is those little details are inconvenient. So same thing on the right, 5 head right down to 3 throat right, 4 throat right up to 6 head right. Double pulled there. And now I'm gonna go back to left for a moment and finish the last main and tie off. So I'm going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 head left for the last main, down to 4 throat right, I think. Let me make sure. No, 5 left throat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's in its own new hole. Now I did this differently on his other racket than normal. I actually knotted at the wrong main, so I'm gonna do it slightly wrong here and knot this at 4 throat left. However, the correct way to do this, I believe, is to tie off at 3 throat. So I'm tying off 1 string higher than I'm really supposed to. Oops, I'm supposed to pull tension before I do this. Only because I want consistency with his other racket, but the recommended way to tie off the gearbox is from 5 throat, you then skip a hole and tie off at 3 throat. So just as an FYI, that's why I'm doing this here, even though I know technically I probably should have been tying off at 3 throat. So here I'm going to tie off with a Parnell Knot, which again you can look up if you want to see details on how to do them. I'm going to use all Parnell knots on this, and for my example I'm tying off at 4 throat left, and I'm using my starting clamp to pull that. Okay, and now I will clip that and finish my last main on my right hand side. By going from 6 head right down to 5 throat right. I'm sorry, 7 head right down to 5 head throat right. Okay, and then I'm going to tension this off at the throat because I'm going to start my crosses with the rest of the string. And I'm going to clamp a little higher up on the string because I want to string ahead on a few of my crosses. So I'm going to string after, this is 8 throat right. I'm going to clamp with quite a bit of string in between, just to give me room to do some crosses before I tension. So from 5 throat right, I go up to 6, and it doesn't particularly matter if you string over and under, I don't think in this case, but I'm going to string over the first main and start my mains here. And sometimes you get a little weirdness with those shared mains in the middle, depending on how they sat when you strung the mains in the shared grommets, because it kind of makes them a little crossy, or close to crossing. But I think that's fine. It's better to have strings not crossing on the outside of the frame than have them not be 100% flawless looking here. You can't really force it both ways very easily. It just depends on how your grommets have worn in over time. Okay, so then I'm going to string two mains ahead just to get them started. And you can see because I'm stringing the part of the racket where the mains are tapered in toward the handle, it's kind of annoying to string here, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, where usually these would be like the last 3 mains at the very end, but you get to start with annoying mains right away. And I'm going to string the 3rd one ahead as well. Okay, and set. So now I can start pulling tension on my mains, and that will take out some of the slack from the string I didn't pull on the last main as well. Okay. And I like to keep these strings moving as I pull them through so that I don't notch the strings too much, if any. Okay. And now I'm just going to basically continue stringing mains, which is going to be a little monotonous. And when I get to the top, I'll have to do the string dampener as well. Okay, so now I have one string that I haven't tensioned, one cross that I haven't tensioned, so I'm going to string ahead again, one more. Always want to pre-weave at least one cross ahead, and you'll see a lot of stringers that do many crosses ahead, but I prefer to do one, sometimes two. It's a personal preference, I think, but always at least one ahead of what you're about to pull. So now I can pull my third cross, and again, remember it's the third cross from the bottom because that's where we started. And I'm going to use this clothespin so I don't have to burn my finger when I pull, just to keep this moving. Again, doing this just to prevent notching on the strings, hopefully. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the crosses never get really comfortable on this racket. It's always just a little tight and cramped all the way up due to this string pattern. If Gearbox people ever watch this, please update your stringing pattern to crosses from the top down, and please update your grommets on future Gearbox rackets to have better shared hole engineering. It's like, I know they never will because they probably share the same grommets on like every racket they've ever made. And it would just make a production nightmare to start with new grommets now, but if I could suggest one update to Gearbox, that would be it. And then changing the string pattern could be done, I think, without any physical changes to the racket. I just haven't spent time thinking about how that would work. I'm sure it can be done. Okay. So we're halfway or a third of the way done with these crosses. So we're, oops, got a little hung up here. It's got a twist. Okay. And once again, the string bed is already fairly tight, so again, that's why these crosses become harder and more slow. Okay. So the next like 5 crosses are probably the easiest of the whole racket, but some rackets you get like 10 plus easy crosses. So as any stringer knows, crosses are generally just a little bit more work than the mains. So you have to work in a tighter space and weave. Okay. I think my favorite racket to string is probably an E-Force. Simply because even though their pattern is very convoluted, at least everything is color coded for you. So it makes it fairly easy to remember once you get the hang of it, without having to go back and look in the book which grommets are shared or not shared, or which holes are skipped or whatever. I really like that about E-Force. Some of the newer, well, Pro Kenix is also almost as easy as it gets. And then some of the newer head rackets that do not have the internal grommet system are also really easy to string. Probably some of the easiest. The head rackets that have the internal grommets, that don't have holes on the frame, on the outside of the frame, are they look really nice, but they're really annoying to string and needlessly convoluted for a purely aesthetic reason. I mean, I guess they're not designing rackets for the benefit of the stringer, but I don't know why you would necessarily want to make it more difficult to string your racket either. I don't know. Seems like maybe that should be considered a little bit. Like, let's not make it look cool but with a super stupid convoluted string pattern. I don't know. Coming from somebody who hasn't been playing lately but still strings. Easy for me to say. Okay, so we got about 5 mains left here to string. So we're almost there. I did want to show you the vibration dampener as well. So I might jump to that because I'm trying to get the video to be under 30 minutes so it doesn't cut off or I don't have to splice it. But we'll see how I look in just a minute here. We got 4 more. And now I'm going to switch to the back side of my pliers because I can move 2 pieces of, or both sides of the string at once, or 2 parts of the string at once, where it starts to get really tight at the top. That works better than the clothespin because the edges can keep moving as well. Otherwise you'll get burn-in on the, you'll get notching on the sides of the string because it gets so tight up here. Okay. And as you can see, now things are getting very cramped, even though usually this would be an easy part of the racket. It's harder than it needs to be, or tighter than it needs to be, I guess. But there's only a few more left, so we're almost there. Okay, so what is this last one? One more after this. Okay. Okay. We've got just a couple minutes left. Really want to make sure I get to that other part. It's going to be close. Okay. All right, so got to string one more main. So these last two mains are the ones especially where you want to keep the string moving in multiple locations if you can, because this is where notching would become really prevalent, because there's not much room for the string to move here at the top of my machine. So I do try and move it, but it's super tight up here. Okay, last weave here. And again, I do need to make sure that as I go up to a couple shared holes at the top of the frame, that I'm not crossing on the outside of the frame. So do be mindful of where you're pulling tension, and before you pull tension, check the outside of the frame to make sure nothing's overlapping or crossing. Okay. Same thing here. Keep this thing moving as I pull it through. And then I'm going to pull tension and tie off at 5 head left. That's where this has left me. I'm going to do a Parnell knot there. Okay, that's here. Got stuck. Okay. Okay, so now I have about 2 minutes left to explain the string dampener. What I'm going to do is tie off, unclamp, and I have this extra piece of string. It's about 5 feet long, and this is where what you're supposed to do is string across at 4 throat, but I'm actually going to string across at 5 throat in this case, just because I tied off earlier and in the wrong spot. So I'm going to string across at 5 throat, which is again a little higher than they recommend. And I'm going to string this through with the dampener on, and I'm going to just alternate as if I were stringing, but except when I get to the middle pairs, there's 4 pairs of shared grommets in the middle, I'm actually going to do 2 strings at once. I don't need to go in between every single string toward the middle. So I go over a pair and then under a pair. And then what I'll do is tie both sides of this off at, in my case, so I'm stringing across at 5 head right across to 5 head left. And I'm gonna tie off 2 holes below at 5 head to 5 throat to 5 throat, and I'm going to tie off at 3 throat left and 3 throat right. So I'm just going to pull tension by hand on this and then tie it off 2 grommets.